Welcome back to another episode of Gumball Love. I'm your host, Melissa Ledger. I help professional women identify red flags, discover their worth, increase their confidence, and take the right actions to find true love. So if you're brand new here, welcome. I have been obsessing over helping women find love for many, many years, and I obsessed over helping you find love even before I found love. I had such a belief in this framework, in this concept, and I'm so glad that I didn't wait until I found the right person to share this concept, because it's helped so many people over the past few years. So many of you have been with me through the years of this podcast. You've seen the products launch, you've seen the growth, you've seen the evolution of Gumball Love. And I believe it's at its best it's ever been. I've created an online assessment tool that I have available to my clients only that actually is able to diagnose what kind of guy you are attracting, what kind of attention he craves, and exactly which flavor of attention he craves the most. So if you're not familiar with Gumball Love really is about a transactional relationship. One person puts in a quarter and the other person gives the gumball or the flavor of attention that the person is craving. So when you are thinking about Gumball Love, I always want you to ask yourself, what is the transaction? What transaction am I completing for this other person? Are they putting in a quarter? Am I giving the gumball? And if so, what gumball am I giving? Am I giving them sex? Am I allowing them to pick fights with me where they can get me worked up? Do I feel like I need to entertain them? Am I changing the channel for them? Am I always doing what they want to do, talking about what they want to talk about? Am I allowing myself to be threatened by the other women he brings up? Is he flirting with people in front of you? Or are you watching him text other girls? Is he not quite done talking to his ex? Are you competing? These are all the flavors. Compete for me, pity me, idolize me, look at me, watch me. Let me be the center of attention. Convince me that you really love me. I'm not really sure. I'm going to be skeptical about everything you do. I'm a perfectionist. Prove to me that you're worthy. All of these things are what I have found that I battled all through the years. And I didn't understand that that's what I was battling. I didn't understand what I was up against. And I was always going to the next book, the next guy telling me what men wanted. And every time I studied what men want, I didn't know that I was losing a part of myself. And that every time I changed something about myself to be what I thought, quote unquote, men wanted, that I became different. And probably at about age 30, 31, 32, in that time frame, I didn't know who I was anymore. And I knew that who I was, I remember somebody must have asked me something and it was just like, wow, I think it was like, what kind of music do you like? And I thought, wow, I don't even know. I mean, I know some songs that come on, but I couldn't even tell you what my favorite foods were, what my favorite music was, favorite colors, where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, because I was living my life for whatever guy was in my life or just other people. I just became a people pleaser. And it really consumed me because I couldn't stand living without the approval of others as well. And so discovering this whole concept over time, which is a whole nother story for a whole nother podcast. I actually should put it in a podcast. But I wanted to share with you about attachment and a specific attachment disorder called ambivalent attachment. And I don't think that ambivalent attachment is talked about enough. And I wanted to give you the official definition here. So first of all, let's talk about ambivalent. And I wanted to share this with you first because I gave you that kind of introduction of my story, because I was dating and I met this guy that I thought was the one. I had the butterflies, like I talked about in the last episode. I really felt strong feelings for him. And as I look at the difference between the guy I thought was the one and the guy that's actually the one, completely different, totally different. But in the beginning, I felt with this guy, I felt intense connection. It was intense chemistry. And so I thought, wow, this has to be what it feels like. How can this not be it? And I will tell you, that is what made me obsessively research this, because I felt stupid. I felt like, how am I getting this wrong? I'm not a dumb person, but how is it that I am somehow misreading these signals? How am I getting this relationship completely wrong? Because in the end, I would look back, and when it ended, it was mind-boggling to me that something could be so great and then go so badly. I mean, as it would turn, what would happen is everything would be perfect. It would be magical. It'd be wonderful in the beginning. And then there would be little tiny signs, little moments he would pull away, little moments where I would feel a mood shift, and it would feel like, oh no, what did I do? And I remember panicking, and I didn't know that panicking is not a good sign, but I was insecure. So I would immediately jump to, I must have done something wrong. What did I say? Oh my God, I said something stupid. And I had this image of the hot, perfect girl that wouldn't act that way. Like, she had this version of some girl that I didn't know. She would have like the most amazing hair and the perfect body and the greatest personality. And I imagined that this is the kind of girl that I needed to be. And so whenever I felt like I slipped out of character maybe, or wasn't living up to that standard, I would panic when he would change his mood or not look at me the same way or not be as intense. And then I would sit and wait for that to come back. But in the meantime, I would be worried, like, what's going on? Even in the very beginning, even when it was so perfect, there would be little tiny nuances of just almost like when you're in the car and your foot comes off the gas just a little bit. You can tell, you can just feel the car. The car has momentum, but you can just feel that gentle slow down just for a second. And that would send shock waves through my body of like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And I just want to note that I was feeling those shock waves because my whole self-esteem and worth was in what he thought of me. And it was like, I had him on such a pedestal that even the slightest irritation from him, even if I had no idea if it was me or something else that was bothering him, I always panicked and searched from the beginning to the end of the relationship through the text messages, everything I could try to figure out of where I may have said something that made him a little bit off. And so this would become an obsession, and then things would get worse, and then it would turn into real arguments, and I would be so devastated because I would think, how is it so great and how did it go so badly? And then finally it would end, right? And so I went to my therapist and I actually did not go to him during this relationship. And I regret that because it would have given me so much insight. But have you ever not gone to your therapist just because you don't want to know what they have to say because you know they're going to tell you what you need to hear? Probably reasons you don't come and do coaching with me sometimes, because you're like, if I go to do coaching with Melissa, she's going to tell me the thing I know I need to hear and I'm not ready to hear it. And I just want to see where this goes because you don't want to face the fact that maybe this isn't the right person for you. And so finally, when I explained this guy to my therapist, he says he has ambivalent attachment. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? And he said, well, when a baby is in its infancy stages and it is learning, when we were all babies, we learned in some way, shape, or form that our mother and father were safe and secure and they were consistently there for us, or we learned that they were inconsistent and not always there for us. So when we cried and our parents came to us every single time and cared for our needs, whether we needed food or a diaper change or just to be held or loved, that consistency develops a security in our ability to attach to others and trust that we are loved and that we are going to be cared for. But imagine a baby that's hungry and needs a diaper change and they cry, but nobody comes. And so when the care is inconsistent, the child is no longer comforted by their love. So if a mother is, say, an addict and she ignores her child for periods of time and the baby cries without that care, then when she finally does come around, it's not as if the baby is reminded, oh, I guess she really is here. And all that time that I went without being cared for, I can now, it's like that the trust isn't there. So that becomes ambivalent. And if you look up the definition of ambivalent just by itself, before you look up ambivalent attachment, it's having mixed feelings or contradictory ideas about something or someone. So immediately as a child in the infancy from 0 to 5 years old, if a child does not feel a sense of security and attachment to the parent, even one parent, so that they learn that there's security there, that they can rely on it, it's consistent. If they can't learn that, then they become ambivalent and they get what's called ambivalent attachment. So ambivalent attachment, just the sheer definition, this is on regain.us, ambivalent attachment is caused when an infant learns that their caregiver or parent is unreliable. This may be because the parent is neglectful, inconsistent, or unavailable. The baby may internalize the belief they cannot depend on any relationship. So when I read that, and I don't know if you've ever done this before, but when you go to therapy and you learn something about someone you really care about and you love, and you're like, oh, so that means what as an adult then? Me talking to my therapist. It means that as an adult, they are not comforted by love. So you love them and they can't feel it. And it's tragic. It's very tragic. And as he got older, as we stayed in touch over many years, as he got older, he was able to process this because he was a really smart guy. So sometimes we're with these guys and we're like, he's so smart and he was so wonderful in the beginning. So what was that? You know, why could he be so loving, so attentive, so incredibly wonderful and listened and so thoughtful? And I mean, this guy would get gifts and just think of me all the time and send me really great text messages. And we'd have great conversations. And so that's also extremely misleading when you're like, okay, we had good conversations. He's a great guy. He can be wonderful when he wants to be. But then he could turn cold as ice and really mean. And so when this happened, it would be devastating because as you develop feelings of love for them, and then they can switch on a dime and it appears that there is almost no attachment to you, then it looks like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I thought we had something and now you're acting completely different. And so that in and of itself is a trauma to you because now what was working toward attachment, he's ripping away from you. And so it's almost like the glue is wet on both sides. And as you come together, you need to stay pressed together. If you can imagine having glue on two pieces of board and you push them together and you hold them and you just stay together. And there isn't anything that rips you apart. So when I look at how Ian and I came together, we started talking and we never separated. We always stayed in touch. And even though our relationship was long distance, we still had our emotional connection stayed connected the entire time. And even though if you want to listen to our whole story, it's podcast 111 where Ian and I tell it together. But even though we were physically not together in that first almost year of our relationship, because we started our relationship during COVID, he was in Canada, I was in New York. And so we weren't able to get to each other physically, but we were both comforted and felt secure in our attachment to each other and our love for each other. And he never did anything to make me doubt that. He never turned cold or mean or rude. None of that inconsistency was there. Which also, as I explain this a little bit further, you'll understand why it's maybe a little harder for you to be comfortable with a healthy relationship because you might be used to dating guys that have ambivalence toward attachment. And that ambivalence toward attachment is what can make you not understand why they are able to separate when it appeared in the beginning that everything was aligning and they were building a strong and meaningful connection. It's like, how can you do this when you're saying, I love you? Sometimes they actually get to that point where they say, I love you. And then all of a sudden it becomes as if the relationship means nothing to them, or they can just turn on a dime and it's as if you're talking to a completely different person. So I'm going to go away from the psychology definition for a second, because as I was developing Gumball Love and I was listening to my therapist, and then I was listening to and reading about attachment, but also applying attention seeking to this whole concept, I came across an article, and I'm not going to go into it in depth because it's a lot, and I would love to teach it to you in a coaching session where you're able to hear this fully, because this goes really deep. But I came across an article that really showed me that people that are not able to attach in a healthy way are really intense in the beginning of a relationship, because the intensity is where they can actually feel something. Like real love is gentle, it's kind, it's always kind of just gently washing over you. It's just really peaceful and calming. It doesn't come at you with raging intensity. I remember falling in love with Ian and feeling such a, I feel like my experience with him was a little bit skewed because I missed him so much. So my feelings for him were strong because I couldn't get to him physically. And we were going through the pandemic. So I was feeling sadness of what was going on in the world. And so everything was a little bit heightened in that respect, but it was more so I just missed him so much. And even when I came back home to Nebraska during the pandemic, because New York was locked down, and he was like, you need to be around family, be around people. The border's closed. I can't get to you. So just go to be with your family. I remember even thinking, but New York's closer to Canada than Nebraska. And I didn't even want to have that. He was like, I understand. It doesn't matter. I can't get to you anyway. So whether you're 7 hours or 17 hours, it doesn't matter. But even that distance felt too long to me, or too far. And I didn't even want to separate us physically, even though it didn't really matter. But I just remember that it always felt calm and consistent. And when they have ambivalent attachment, where they are not comforted by love. So imagine, go back to the baby, where the baby, now it has a need, it's reaching out, but when you meet the need, it's also not really satisfied either, because it's no longer able to take comfort in the security that should be there of being cared for and loved. So in short, just think of it as they're not comforted by love. So what are they comforted by? And what I discovered is that when I go back to that ex, that he had ambivalent attachment. So if I wasn't entertaining him, if I wasn't idolizing him in intense ways and keeping things exciting, and then if things weren't exciting, then he would pick fights. And when I developed the quiz, and I took the quiz on this particular guy, when I first developed my quiz/assessment, and I thought, okay, because I was thinking, I need a way that I can give a tool for my clients to come and say, okay, here's my guy, what's going on? And I didn't want you to have to tell me a story or multiple stories for me to get a picture and have you go through multiple sessions where I could finally give an analysis. I wanted something where I could say, how can I encompass all the signs of a gumball guy and have someone take an assessment and have it give results where then I can see, okay, so I can hear one story, maybe two, And in one session, I can sum up exactly what this guy does, how he behaves, how those patterns present, and why it's confusing to her. And so I just did this with a client recently where he led with convince me. And convince me guys have a superiority complex. They are the skeptic, and they're always making you feel like you're wrong and they're right. You're always wrong. You're always wrong. So when you're hearing that message over and over and over again, you don't understand where it's coming from. It beats you down in the process. And then you're not the strongest version of yourself. And you also love this guy. And so when you love somebody and you just want them to love you back, you just want to make the relationship work, it's really hard to process what's actually going on. And so getting back to my ex, what could I do to comfort him if he isn't comforted by love? I have to give him attention, and I have to give it to him with intensity in order to keep him at a point where he was satisfied and felt good in our relationship. But that was even a roller coaster, because sometimes I could give him certain flavors of attention. Maybe I felt like he was bored and I would entertain him. Maybe I felt like he was feeling down and out and he was needing pity, or he was feeling down and out and he needed me to pump him up. So it was like, what do I have to do to change your mood so that you now enjoy our time together? That is how I had to manage that relationship, because just being me, just loving him, just hanging out and just being ourselves, that wasn't enough, because he was not comforted by that. And when he wasn't comforted by that, I felt like I'm doing something wrong. And so I would try to figure out, what is it? Am I boring? Am I too fat? Am I not pretty enough? Is he losing his attraction to me? You know how we do. We go through all these things. We're like, what is it that I can do? And you're jumping from one foot to the other, trying to figure it out. And as I look at that versus what I have to do for Ian, it's just, I think of that girl and I think, wow, how exhausting. Because Ian and I both show each other every day. All you got to do is wake up and be you. And that's it. And we're both working so hard. I'm working 2 jobs, building this business, I have so many new clients now with Gumball Love, and this is really building. This assessment has helped clarify so much. It's so much more effective in my coaching. So if you do coaching with me and you're like, okay, I really need to understand this. What kind of a guy have I been dating? What are the past guys? So I also want you to think about it like this. Look, I took the quiz on that guy and I thought he was an entertain me, idolize me gumball guy. And I took my own freaking quiz and it came up fight me first. And I was like, I know how the quiz works. I know what boxes to check, but I tried to really go through it like, okay, just try not to overthink it. Just check the boxes that apply and just test it out. And it was one of the first times that we had run the numbers and calculated quiz results. And when it came back, fight me, I was like, wow, even I was wrong about my own quiz and my own concept. But then it proved something to me, that even though, yes, he needed to be constantly entertained. He was bored all the time. He would always say he was bored. And he did need to be idolized because he was always pontificating about his accomplishments and what a great catch he was, and always giving like always complimenting himself and wanting me to agree, like, oh my gosh, yes, you are this great guy and you are very successful and you have a great job and blah, 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 blah. And that's what I kind of remembered. But as I took the assessment, when that fight me came through first, I realized, yes, everything was always escalating to an extreme level, because extreme intensity. So if he was bored, I wasn't entertaining him. He couldn't get high. So if you have a guy that's picking fights, a lot of times it's because they can't get high. They can't get the sugar rush from being idolized or entertained or pitied. That doesn't quite give them the soothing or the validation that the gumball usually provides. So just as a reminder, what is the gumball? It's something that soothes, stimulates, suppresses pain or gives pleasure. So, and all of that falls under the umbrella of validation. So essentially, the gumball guy is coming to you and saying, validate me, tell me I'm okay. So sex becomes the gumball, not that sex is just a sugar high. Sex can be a very meaningful part of a relationship. But if somebody isn't connecting with you on a deeper level and they're just having sex, then sex does become the sugar high and it becomes a quick fix in the moment. And then they're going to need something else. And so when that something else doesn't work, often many of the flavors of attention will escalate to drama and fighting. And so when I looked at this concept and I thought, okay, so if you're like me, I know a lot of us do this, you look up stuff about narcissism and sociopaths and we try to diagnose the guy. Because I used to think if I can figure this out, I can figure out, okay, what's going on in his past? What is he struggling with? Maybe I can help him because you are a solution person. You are a forgiving, loving, total giver. And you're willing to do what it takes to fix the relationship. And so I will tell you that workhorse in you will be totally rewarded in the right relationship because when you work hard at your relationship, when you are a partnership, yes, there are challenges. Ian and I have had many challenges. I mean, starting off with, falling in love during the pandemic, then he had to move here. And then, we both we both work from home. Our jobs are, in the same house and managing all that and meeting family and traveling and going on vacations and figuring out dynamics and dogs and all of those things require partnership. It requires collaboration. And sometimes there are struggles. Sometimes there's drama outside of your relationship that you help each other work through. Ian had 3 surgeries he had to go through almost the second he arrived. He realized his elbow bone was broken and it was tearing up his triceps muscle. And so it was like, oh my gosh, he had to go into surgery right away. And then there were complications. There was a second surgery. I've had a surgery, a bone graft surgery on my tooth. I mean, it's like we've gone through a lot together. I got the Rona twice and he helped me through that. And so there's so much that you experience as a couple together and it does require collaboration. Those are the things that are comforting about a relationship. You go through something, you're able to collaborate and you say things to each other like, thank you so much for going through that. I know that was a lot and I just appreciate you being there. And then Ian will always be like, of course, I'm always here for you. And I have to tell you there for the longest time, I was just like, can this really be real? I just felt like so overwhelmed with love because he's just so consistent. And I know you are too. And that's the kind of person I attract, like anyone I coach. In fact, whenever clients say, Melissa, I'm worried that I'm a gumball girl. And I say, gumball people never hire Melissa Ledger to be their coach. I can assure you of that. I never end up with a gumball client. But it gets in your head because when you're in a relationship with someone that has an attachment issue and they aren't able to be in a relationship and enjoy it for the things that they should be able to enjoy it for and to be able to feel secure just in the relationship itself, just by being attached to that person and feel that sense of security. When that is not there, then you have a lot of other issues to worry about. So I wanted to also highlight that ambivalent attachment will come across. Sometimes you might be like, well, if he's not comforted by a relationship, then why is he so needy? Because a lot of times ambivalent attachment will come across as needy. It will come across as like they don't want to be alone. And so this is the tragedy about people that have grown up as children in households where this attachment style developed, because it's like they're needy, but when they get what they want, it's not enough. There's something missing. And because they haven't identified that what the actual problem is. And so this requires professional help. And I want you to just note that. This is why I'm doing this podcast, because if you've fallen in love with somebody like this and you are experiencing this dynamic, you're going to naturally start to question yourself, because what you do for them or how you love them will feel like it's not what they want or what they need. So they will feel needy. Their feelings will get out of control quickly. They will fall in love quickly, but then all of a sudden things will feel off because they don't know how to deal with infatuation slowly moving away. But also, I feel like, yes, infatuation fades, but when you have true love, I'm trying to say like infatuation fades, but it shouldn't fade to a drop off to nothing. Sorry, my dogs are wrestling in the background. It shouldn't come to a screeching halt. Like some people give you that impression like, oh yeah, when the infatuation phase is over, then all of a sudden reality hits and then you're not going to have any of those feelings anymore. I don't think that that's true. I think that, everybody has a little bit different story, but if that were the case, I would be really disappointed, because this is why it's very important to be physically attracted to your partner and also mentally stimulated. You have to be able to have good conversations. You have to be able to have a connection that is steady. You have to be able to trust your partner. And so when somebody has ambivalent attachment, it's hard for them to trust you. So when you feel like they don't trust you, then it makes you doubt yourself, which then can erode at your self-worth. So the purpose of this podcast is to help you to see, okay, maybe I'm with somebody who appears overly needy, then they go cold. So that hot and cold is often a tell of, maybe there's some ambivalence there. So here's what you can do. Ask about their childhood, not in a therapist way, but where did you grow up? Are your parents married? Are they divorced? What was your childhood like? And if you hear a lot of trauma, which a lot of people will tell you their trauma stories, and we all have them. I think everybody has something. And so the difference between someone, it's like some people have dealt with it and some people haven't. But if you haven't dealt with it, then you are pulling these things into your relationship that are going to cause issues. So I have anxious attachment, or I used to. I don't have it anymore. And that is the beautiful thing. I researched anxious attachment because, like I mentioned, when we were falling in love, we were, so far apart, and I hadn't seen Ian in 5 years at that point. So I was like, I'm falling in love with him. I remember how I felt when I first met him, but now there's the pandemic, the borders closed, I'm falling in love, and what's going to happen if I see him? So there were some added things, but I still noticed anxious attachment coming up. And, my parents didn't have the perfect marriage. So my mom was probably very anxious with that dynamic as a child. And so I probably had some anxiety from that, although she's a very caregiving mother. So I know for sure I didn't go without a bottle or a diaper change. So I look at that and I can look back and go, okay, maybe some anxiety from childhood, but probably more so in the later part of my life, relationships I couldn't rely on. There were lots of relationships that were not consistent, that I thought were great, that were not. And that was in romantic relationships and non-romantic relationships. I'm also developing this assessment so you can take this with non-romantic relationships. I cannot wait to push this out. I've been working on this. We actually hired a developer and he was unable to do it on a platform, which made us had to start this project completely over, but I will not give up and we are back on track and it looks better than ever. So I think it was meant to be. But I wanted you to be able to take an assessment and look at, take the assessment on your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your boss. We have every type of relationship you could possibly imagine to determine, are these things present in other relationships that you're not aware of? So getting back to this ambivalence, if you think about my ex, he had ambivalent attachment and I had anxious. So when he became ambivalent, or cold, that would trigger my anxiety. And so I think that a lot of us wouldn't necessarily be triggered if we had a more secure partner. So like Ian doesn't have a lot of anxiety around attachment. He was able to securely attach to me and he never had issues. I was always the one that had the worries and, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit of a worrier anyway. So if you can relate to me where it's like, I'm worried about the future, I'm constantly worried. I'm always planning. So that's also feeds into it. So some of this is just our personality. Are you a planner? Are you a worrier? You're always trying to, I'm trying to figure out where the problems are going to be so I can solve them and that I don't get caught in a mess or a failure. And that's why this whole concept exists, by the way, because I would read about this stuff. And before I ever thought about putting Gumball Love out into the world, I was just doing this for myself. I was like, I got to figure this out. Like, what is going on with these guys? Why are they so great in the beginning and then they pull away? Okay, so ambivalent attachment style. But what does that mean? Why is he okay? So he doesn't feel secure in attachment, but why does he look secure sometimes? What is going on? Like I would find an opposite for everything I would find, if that makes sense. It was like, yeah, okay, you're telling me he's ambivalent, but he's also needy. So what does that mean? And I found it all very confusing and I just couldn't stop researching until I got answers. So you can see where if someone has ambivalent attachment, they didn't have that secure attachment as a child, they are needy, but then they become cold. So when you see that, now you can think, okay, there's something else going on here. And this is where you separate, is it my fault? Or is there something else going on here that's out of my control? Okay. So the person that has, I just pulled up some signs here. This is aplaceofhope.com. Here are the statements that describe most people with ambivalent attachment style. And let me just see if I can get, this is by Dr. Gregory Jantz. And he says, I really like sharing my feelings with my partner, but they don't seem as open as I am. Okay. So right away, like they share, but if you don't share at their level, then they have a lack of trust there. My feelings can get out of control quickly. They don't have control because those feelings were homeless, if you think of it that way. Like I want to love, but I don't know where to put those feelings because I didn't have a secure spot to put them. They worry about being alone. They worry about being abandoned. So the very thing that they want, it's like they want the relationship, but they're afraid of getting abandoned. So, and a lot of us can relate to that fear of abandonment because you've been abandoned. So a person that has an ambivalent attachment style and then they get abandoned truly by a parent, this compounds this effect. Okay. So when you're in love with somebody that has this going on, you need to weigh this in the balance so that you don't make yourself the cause of it or that you are somehow responsible or that you can fix all of this. It says, I strongly desire to be very intimate with people. So the desire for intimacy is there. And this is what I would see in my ex. Like he wanted it. He would pursue me. He would pursue me heavily. He would say all these nice things. And it would make me think, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. He's so wonderful. But then, bam, he could turn on a dime and he would get afraid. But see, when you have him on a pedestal, I would have him on a pedestal. I thought he was the greatest thing ever. So I couldn't see his fear. I couldn't see the child struggling with attachment. All I could see was this amazing guy that I thought was so cute and had the luscious lips and all the things. You know, we make them into superheroes. And so we don't see their vulnerabilities. And when we don't see them, we start to blame the lack of connection or the fact that the relationship isn't going the way we want. We start to blame that on ourselves. So I tend to value close, intimate relationships over personal achievement and success. When I get stressed, I desperately seek others for support, but no one seems as available as I would like them to be. So there again, it says, like, I want, but I can't find what I'm looking for. A person with ambivalent attachment style is constantly looking for proof of love. So this is where a convince me person can show up. And it says they are distrustful of others and seek to verify the relationship, often with extreme behaviors that can backfire or alienate the other person. So this is where you see fight me. This is where you see those extreme levels. Because the relationship always seems in jeopardy, the ambivalent person tends to focus obsessively on the relationship. How is it going? Are there any problems? Did I do everything right? How does the other person feel about me? And that obsession will then lead them to sometimes make grand conclusions. You must be cheating on me. You don't really love me. So ambivalent attachment often is closely associated with convince me. That's one of the flavors of when you find yourself always proving yourself to them, then that's when you know you're in a relationship with somebody that might have this. So I think we all have some level of attachment disorder. So I always want to, here's the thing. I don't want to shame anybody that has these because you can't help it, right? However, I don't want you to feel bad about yourself because you can't get a relationship to work with this type of person. So we all need to own our attachment issues. We all have to work on them, and we have to be able to see how it's affecting someone else. And so I want you to see what you're up against, and then maybe you can have a productive conversation with them. Like, look, I think you have ambivalent attachment. So when I'm doing this, this isn't bringing you security. Are you willing to go to therapy? Because you can't become the therapist and start explaining them. And the old me would be like, let me send you a link. Let me send you podcasts on this. Let me help you with this. And you can't. You cannot. It's just like they came into your living room just imagine somebody comes in your living room. Their leg is broken. Part of the bone is sticking out of the flesh. So gross, I know. It's bleeding. Are you going to attempt to fix that? You're not. You're going to say, oh my gosh, we're calling 911. You'd probably call 911. You probably I wouldn't want to move somebody like that. I would be like, I am not touching that because I'm going to screw up your leg permanently. So let's make sure we get the right people here to move you, set the leg, and it needs to heal properly. We know what to do when we can see a physical pain or trauma. But when it's emotional, all of a sudden we think we can Google it and talk it out and we become professionals. We're not. Okay? So keep that in mind, that this requires professional help. This requires the experts that have spent years studying this, and you do not want to take this on for your partner. So you want to take this on for yourself. This is where we can examine ourselves, but when you take it on yourself, you still go to a therapist and make sure you work through these things. These things are so important. So in coaching, I help you figure this out. So if you haven't gone to therapy, a lot of my clients go to therapy, but if you aren't going or you've had a bad experience, let's talk about it, because I feel like this coaching is a great accompaniment to therapy, and I can help you figure out what needs to be discussed in therapy and what we can discuss in coaching. And so basically I will tell you, here's where you need the doctor and here's where you need me. And I'm going to help you see the patterns of what you've been dealing with and what you can now say, okay, this is not my fault. I can put some of these things to rest. I can gain clarity on what I've been dealing with. Because online dating and finding the right person seems so overwhelming to you because you don't know what you're doing. And I know that sounds like, blunt, but I didn't know what I was doing either. I had no idea. I was just out there trying to post cute pictures, and I thought what I wrote in the bio was really the key, and then trying to suck my gut in as much as I could. And, now there's that thing you can do where you can put your tongue to the roof of your mouth to make your double chin go away, which I can never seem to get right. I'm trying to master it in my mirror. I'm okay, if I do it toward the side, then my whole double chin disappears. It's these are the things you're focused on. You're I want to just be enough. I want to attract the right person. I want him to fall in love with me. And then you're on these dates and you're so nervous. You're not comfortable in your own skin. You're overthinking everything and you're not able to really assess and relax and figure out, who is this person? Is this somebody I want to date? Is this somebody that is really going to be the right fit for me? Am I having fun? I want you to be able to be so relaxed and know who you are, know what you need, know what you're looking for, and be confident in what you have to offer. So when you go on a date, you're able to see what's actually going on versus being so caught up. Like I talk about my first date with Ian, and I was very much in a magical state. And I love it because it worked out, but I was also in a fantasy land. And I own that. I very much was so looking forward to that date that I had made it a fantasy, but I wasn't really fully present. And we walked down, I just recreated the date. We were just in New York a couple of days ago, and we recreated the date. And I walked downstairs, and I remembered that the bathroom, I tried to go into the ladies' room to like get myself together, like look at myself in the mirror and be like, dude, be present. And I walked down there and I realized it was one of those bathrooms where they had individual stalls, kind of like at the airport where you can lock each door, and then the sinks were all open. And I remember I didn't remember it till I was down there, and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember coming down here and thinking, oh wow, I can't even like have my moment with the mirror because he could walk in here and see me because it's like a unisex bathroom. I was like, shoot. So and then I thought, yep, see, there I wasn't present, because I was so worried about if he was going to be attracted to me and if I was going to be exciting enough or pretty enough or skinny enough. And that's where my focus was. And I did okay through the date. We had good conversation, but I want you to feel better than that. I want you to feel more relaxed, and we can get you there. I'm getting my clients there every day. We meet one-to-one. We have a group coaching where we meet every Wednesday night and we talk through these things. What's going on? How are you feeling? So you stay on track, because look, you need accountability. So this is not something we should be doing alone. And I did it alone for so many years. And if I could go back and have this system and put it in place, I think, I probably wouldn't have met Ian, because, my life trajectory wouldn't have gone that way, but I would have been married much faster, and I would have had so much more more time. Like, now I'm at an age where maybe I can have kids, maybe I can't. But had I known this, then I would have had more choices now. So I think everything happens for a reason, but I'm saying this to you because maybe you're at a point where you don't want to waste any more time. Or maybe you are my age and you're like, look, Melissa, I am in my 40s. I am in my 50s, and I don't want to spend my 50s, 60s, 70s single. I want to find the right person. And I know the older we get, the more hopeless it can feel. But actually, that's also a myth. There are guys at every single age, at every single stage. You can find somebody. This actually isn't as hard as you think it is. But we make it hard because we're doing it the old way, the way that doesn't work, the way that makes you change who you are. If you're listening to the advice of what men want, if you're watching a bunch of fairy tales, if you have yourself in a fantasy mindset, you're going to miss out on the reality that's so much better than any fantasy you've ever watched. The reality of true love that's there for you on a consistent basis is so much better than any fairy tale or any mountaintop experience. I can assure you, I feel so blessed to have finally found that love that I can speak to you from an authentic place. And this is what I promised you guys for years, that I would not settle and I would not be with somebody unless I felt 100% this is the right person. This is where I can feel like, yes, I am with the one for me, and that I am happy every single day. I have no regrets. I have no cold feet. I am running to the altar with a big smile on my face, and my heart is full, and I know I'm with the right person. I know I'm cared for. I have trust. I have all the things that I ever wanted and could have dreamed of. And all I'm focused on is, making sure everyone has a good time and that all the things happen the way they should. And I'm still a worrier in that way. But, I want to make sure that the wedding goes exactly the way it should. My dad's put so much into this. I want him to feel like the day was a huge success. So that's what I'm focused on. But there's no nervous jitters. There's no worries. There's no fear, because I know I'm loved and cared for. And this is what I want for you so much. And it's why I show up every single day, because I know there's always just one more girl. And as soon as I bring on new clients, I just feel like, wow, what if I had stopped and I wouldn't be helping her. Look how much she's gaining just from sometimes it's in the first session. It's like, oh my gosh, I can never quit doing this because of that transformation that sometimes happens in call number 1. So if you need this, let's do it. Invest in yourself. It's time for you to invest in yourself. It's time for you to decide, okay, I'm doing this. Look, it's not going to be a bunch of pressure. I don't do that to you. I meet you exactly where you are, and we do this at your pace. And I just believe that you have to organically grow, and I give you guidance. There is the framework, and it is so simple, yet there is a lot of customization that I do because I want you to feel like this is what you need and how you need it, and it's going to get you to finding your love, and I'm with you every step of the way. So reach out to me, Melissa@gumballlove.com. And until next time, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.